Chapter 1. The Cold Case Resurfaces. The rain fell in soft curtains over St. Mary Mead, blurring the edges of the village's stone cottages and turning the cobblestone lanes into slick mirrors. Miss Jane Marple sat by her parlour window, a steaming cup of chamomile tea untouched on the table. At 72, she was no longer the sharp-eyed detective who'd once unravelled the knottiest crimes in the county. Her hair, once chestnut, was now a silver crown, and her hands, though steady, bore the faint tremble of age. But her mind was still a steel trap. The letter had arrived that morning, slipped under her door like a secret too heavy to dishear. Knock. No stamp, no return address, just her name in spidery black ink, Miss Jane Marple. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typewritten, with words that stirred a ghost from 20 years past. You were wrong about Lily Hawthorne. We all were. Check the old oak by the mill. You'll find the truth there. Miss Marple's fingers tightened around the paper, creasing its edges. Lily Hawthorne. The name alone summoned memories of a case that had haunted her, the one she'd never solved. 20 years ago, Lily, a 28-year-old artist with a smile that could charm the devil, was found dead in her studio, a single stab wound to her chest. The village had mourned. The police had scrambled, and Miss Marple, then at the height of her career, had chased every lead until they crumbled to dust. No arrests, no justice, just a wound in St. Mary Mead that never quite healed. She set the letter down and glanced at the rain-smeared window, the old oak by the mill. It was a half-mile walk, and her knees weren't what they used to be. But the letter's words gnawed at her. You were wrong. She'd heard worse in her time. Suspects spitting venom, colleagues doubting her instincts, but this felt different. Personal. Blast it all, she muttered, grabbing her coat and umbrella. The chamomile would have to wait. The mill stood at the edge of St. Mary Mead, its wheel long stilled, moss claiming its stones. The oak beside it was ancient, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky. Miss Marple's boots sank into the muddy path as she approached, her umbrella doing little against the drizzle. She scanned the tree, its trunk wide enough to hide a man. Nothing obvious, no carved initials, no hidden compartments. Just bark and rain. Then she saw it, a glint of metal at the base, half buried in the roots. She knelt, ignoring the ache in her joints, and brushed away the dirt. A small tin box, rusted but intact, emerged from the earth. Her pulse quickened. She pried it open with a stick, revealing a single object inside, a silver locket, its chain tangled, its surface engraved with a delicate L.H. Lily Hawthorne. Miss Marple's breath caught. She'd seen this locket before, in old case photos, hanging around Lily's neck. The police had assumed it was lost or stolen after the murder, yet here it was, buried like a secret too dangerous to keep. "Who left you here?" she whispered, turning the locket in her gloved hands. "And why now?" Back in her parlour, Miss Jane spread the case files across her dining table, their edges yellowed, but their details sharp in her memory. Lily's photo stared up at her. Dark curls, green eyes, a smile that hinted at secrets. The autopsy report was clinical. Death by a single thrust. No defensive wounds, no fingerprints. The suspect list was a tangle of motives. A jealous lover, a rival artist, a spurned friend. All had alibis, flimsy but unshaken. Miss Jane had interviewed them all, pressed them until they cracked, but the truth had slipped through her fingers. She opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photograph, faded but clear. Lily laughing, her arm around a man whose face was scratched out, leaving only a shadow of a jawline. Miss Jane frowned. This wasn't in the original evidence log. Someone had hidden it, and someone else had wanted it found. A knock at the door startled her. She tucked the locket into her pocket and opened the door to find Tom Grayson, the village's postman and unofficial gossip. His cap dripped with rain, and his eyes were wide with something like fear. "Miss Marple," he said, voice low, "I heard you were out by the mill. Folks are talking. They're saying Lily's case might not be dead after all." Miss Jane raised an eyebrow. "Folks talk too much, Tom. Who's stirring this up?" He shifted, glancing over his shoulder. "Can't say for sure, but I saw someone by the oak last night late, hooded, moving quick. Thought it was kids at first, but now—" He trailed off, eyeing her. "You're not digging into it again, are you? That case nearly broke you last time." She smiled thinly. "Go dry off, Tom, and keep your ears open." He left. Miss Jane closed the door and leaned against it, the locket heavy in her pocket. The letter, the locket, the hooded figure. Someone was pulling strings, and she was no puppet. 20 years ago, she'd failed Lily Hawthorne. She wouldn't fail her again. Chapter 2. The Ghost of Lily Hawthorne. The morning sun broke through St. Mary Mead's clouds, casting a golden glow over the village green. But Miss Jane Marple felt no warmth. She stood outside the old Hawthorne cottage, now a boarded-up relic, at the edge of town. 20 years ago, this had been Lily Hawthorne's home and studio, a place bursting with colour and life. Now ivy choked its walls, and the windows were dark, like eyes that had seen too much. Miss Jane clutched the locket in her coat pocket, its weight a reminder of the task ahead. She needed to know Lily, not just as a victim, but as the woman who'd stirred passions strong enough to kill. The case files told only half the story. Lily, 28, painter, single, found dead on July 12, 2005. But files didn't capture a person's soul. For that, Miss Jane needed to walk where Lily had walked, touch what she'd touched. The cottage's front door was locked, but the back gate hung loose, creaking as Miss Jane pushed it open. The garden was a tangle of weeds, but traces of Lily lingered. A stone bench where she'd sketched, a rusted easel tipped against a tree. Miss Jane imagined her here, paint-streaked hands capturing the world in bold strokes. Lily's art had been her voice, vibrant landscapes, portraits that seemed to breathe, each one sold before the paint dried. She'd been St. Mary Mead's pride until she became its tragedy. Inside, the cottage smelled of dust and time. Miss Jane had called in a favour from the village council to get the key, promising not to disturb the place. The studio was upstairs, untouched since the murder. She climbed the narrow stairs, her cane tapping softly, and pushed open the door. The room was frozen in 2005. Canvases leaned against walls, their colours faded but still striking. A table held dried paint tubes, brushes, and a cracked mug with World's best artist scrawled in childish script, likely a gift from a local kid. In the corner, a chalk outline marked the floor where Lily had been found, its edges smudged by years. Miss Marple's chest tightened. This was where it had ended, with a single brutal stab. She knelt by the outline, her eyes scanning the room. The police had scoured it back then, but they'd missed the locket. What else had they overlooked? She moved to a bookshelf, its shelves sagging under sketchbooks and art journals. One caught her eye, a leather-bound notebook, its cover embossed with LH. She opened it, revealing pages of Lily's handwriting, interspersed with sketches of faces, flowers, and cryptic notes. One entry, dated a month before her death, stood out. He thinks I don't see him watching. Always in the shadows, always waiting. I should tell someone, but who'd believe me? They all think I'm untouchable. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. He, a stalker, a lover? The scratched-out face in the Locket's photo flickered in her mind. She flipped through more pages, finding sketches of a day, man, vague, faceless, but recurring. Lily had been afraid, or at least wary. Why hadn't she gone to the police? A floorboard creaked downstairs. Miss Jane froze, slipping the notebook into her bag. "Hello?" she called, her voice steady despite the jolt in her chest. No answer, but the air felt heavier, like someone was holding their breath. She gripped her cane and descended the stairs, her eyes darting to every shadow. The kitchen was empty, the back door ajar. She stepped outside, scanning the garden. A figure moved beyond the gate, slight, hooded, gone before she could call out. "Damn it," she muttered, her heart racing. The same hooded figure Tom had mentioned. She locked the cottage and headed back to the village, the notebook and locket, burning holes in her bag. At the village cafe, Miss Jane sipped a too-bitter coffee and spread Lily's notebook on the table. The cafe was quiet, save for the hum of gossip from two locals at the counter. She caught Lily's name in their whispers and leaned closer. "Saying Miss Marple's poking around again," one said, a woman with a tight bun. "Thinks she'll solve Lily's murder after all this time." The other, an older man with a weathered face, snorted. "Lily was trouble, mark my words. Too many men sniffing around her. No wonder someone snapped." Miss Jane cleared her throat, loud enough to make them jump. "Trouble was she?" she said, fixing them with a look that could peel paint. "Care to share with an old busybody?" The woman flushed. "Just talk, Miss Marple. You know how it was. Lily was, well, magnetic. Half the village loved her, half hated her. She had a way of making folks feel small without trying." "Anyone in particular?" Miss Jane asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. The man shifted. "You'd know better than us. You grilled everyone back then. But if you're asking, I'd say Clara Weston never got over Lily stealing her spotlight. And that painter chap, Vincent, he was mad for her. Didn't take kindly to her brushing him off." Miss Jane nodded, filing the names away. Clara Weston, the village's former darling before Lily's star rose. Vincent Reed, the brooding artist who'd sworn Lily was his muse. Both on her old suspect list, both worth revisiting. She left the cafe and paused by the village green, where a faded mural of lilies, a swirling depiction of St. Mary Mead's hills, still graced the library wall. The paint was peeling, but Lily's spirit lingered in every stroke. Miss Jane felt a pang. Lily hadn't just been a victim. She'd been a force, loved and envied, admired and feared. The notebook's words echoed, always in the shadows, always, waiting. Someone had watched Lily, and now someone was watching Miss Marple. She tightened her grip on her cane and headed for Clara Weston's house. The ghost of Lily Hawthorne was stirring, and Miss Jane would follow her wherever she led. Chapter 3. The Suspects, Then and Now. Miss Jane Marple's boots crunched on the gravel path leading to Clara Weston's cottage, a tidy rose-framed house that screamed respectability. 20 years ago, Clara had been St. Mary Mead's golden girl, a singer with a voice like honey, adored by all until Lily Hawthorne's star outshone hers. The old case files painted Clara as bitter, her alibi a shaky claim of being at a choir practice no one fully corroborated. Now, Miss Jane needed to see the woman Clara had become. She knocked, and the door opened to reveal Clara, 60-ish, her once auburn hair now a muted grey, her eyes sharp but wary. She wore a cardigan buttoned to the throat, as if armouring herself against the world. "Miss Marple," Clara said, her voice cool, "I heard you were stirring up old ghosts. Come in then, let's get this over with." The parlour was a shrine to Clara's past. Framed photos of her singing at village fairs, a dusty trophy for Best Vocalist 2003. Miss Jane settled into a stiff chair, declining the offer of tea. She didn't have time for pleasantries. "You'll know why I'm here," Miss Jane said, her gaze steady. "Lily Hawthorne. I'm reopening the case. New evidence has come to light." Clara's lips thinned. "New evidence? After 20 years? You're chasing shadows, just like last time." "Maybe, but shadows have shapes." Miss Jane leaned forward. "Back then, you said you were at choir practice the night Lily died. Yet no one could swear you were there the whole time. Care to clarify?" Clara's fingers twisted a handkerchief. "I was there. I sang Abide With Me. Ask anyone. I didn't sneak off to stab Lily, if that's what you're implying. I wasn't that desperate for attention." "But you resented her," Miss Jane pressed. "Lily took your spotlight. The village worshipped her, and you were overlooked." Clara's laugh was brittle. "Worshipped? They used her. Lily was a novelty, a pretty artist with a tragic streak. Hey, I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She was lonely, you know. All that charm, and no one really knew her." Miss Jane noted the shift in Clara's tone, less defensive, more reflective. "Lonely how? Did she confide in you?" Clara hesitated, then shrugged. "Once, at a fair, she'd had too much wine, said she felt like a painting everyone admired but no one understood. I told her to stop fishing for compliments. Maybe I was harsh, but I didn't kill her." Miss Jane filed that away. Lonely. It echoed the notebooks, cryptic entries. "Did you ever see her with someone secretive? A man, maybe, who kept to the shadows?" Clara's eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "Lily had admirers. Too many. I didn't keep track." She stood signalling the end of the conversation. "Find your killer, Miss Marple, but leave me out of it." Next, Miss Jane headed to the outskirts of St. Mary Mead, where Vincent Reed lived in a converted barn that doubled as his art studio. Vincent, 45 now, had been 25 when Lily died. a passionate, volatile painter who'd been obsessed with her. His alibi, painting alone in his old flat, had been impossible to verify. The case files noted his temper, his drunken rants about Lily rejecting him. Vincent opened the door, paint smudged on his cheek, his dark hair streaked with grey. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Miss Marple. "You again? Thought you'd retired." "I had. Lily brought me back." Miss Jane stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The barn smelled of turpentine and regret, canvases stacked against every wall. Most were dark, chaotic, nothing like Lily's vibrant work. Vincent snorted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Lily, always Lily. What do you want, Marple? I told you everything 20 years ago. Did you?" Miss Marple's voice was mild, but her eyes were sharp. "You loved her. She didn't love you back. That kind of rejection stings. Enough to make a man lash out." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I didn't touch her. I was painting that night. You saw my sketches, dated, time-stamped. I wasn't near her studio." "Sketches can be faked," Miss Jane said, "and you were seen arguing with her a week before she died." Loudly. "Care to explain?" He turned away, grabbing a brush as if to dismiss her. "Lily was impossible. I thought we had something, but she shut me out. Said I was too intense. I yelled, she yelled. That's it. I didn't kill her." Miss Jane noticed a small painting in the corner, half covered by a cloth. She lifted it, revealing a portrait of Lily. Young, radiant, her eyes haunting. "You're still painting her?" Vincent's shoulders slumped. "She's in my head. Always will be. But I'm not your killer. Look at someone who had more to lose." "Like who?" Miss Jane asked, setting the painting down. He hesitated, then muttered, "Henry Carver, her landlord. He was always sniffing around, acting like he owned her. Creepy bastard. Nobody looked at him twice. Henry Carver, another name from the suspect list. A wealthy widower who'd rented Lily her cottage and had a reputation for being overly attentive." Miss Jane nodded, her mind already turning to the next visit. Her final stop was the village pub, where Sarah Finch, Lily's closest friend, now worked as a barmaid. Sarah, once a lively girl of 26, was now 46, her face lined with grief and time. She'd been devastated by Lily's death, her alibi solid. She'd been visiting her mother in a neighbouring town, but Miss Jane needed her perspective. Sarah wiped down the bar as Miss Jane approached. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice soft, "I heard you found something. Is it true?" "Maybe," Miss Jane said, sliding onto a stool. "I need to know about Lily. Who she was, who she trusted. You were her friend. What didn't you tell me back then?" Sarah's hands stilled. "I told you everything. Lily was my sister, not by blood but by heart. She was kind, funny, but guarded. She didn't let many people in." "Guarded how?" Miss Jane asked. "Was there someone she was afraid of?" Sarah bit her lip, glancing around the empty pub. She never said afraid exactly, but a few weeks before she died, she started locking her doors, checking her windows. Said she felt watched. I thought it was just her imagination. She was always dramatic. Now I wish I'd listened." Miss Jane leaned closer. "Did she mention a man? Someone who wasn't Vincent or Henry?" Sarah shook her head, but her eyes were distant. "No names, just once," she said. "Some people think they own you, but they don't." I didn't push her. God, I should have. Miss Jane patted her hand. You couldn't have known. As she left the pub, the locket in her pocket felt heavier. Clara, Vincent, Sarah, Henry, each carried a piece of Lily's story, warped by time and guilt, but someone had buried that locket, and someone had sent that letter. The suspects were no longer just names in a file. They were threads in a tapestry Miss Jane was only beginning to unravel. Chapter 4. A Hidden Diary. Miss Jane Marple stood in Lily Hawthorne's studio once more, the afternoon light filtering through cracked windows, casting jagged shadows across the chalk outline on the floor. The air was thick with dust and memory, but Miss Marple's focus was razor-sharp. The locket, the notebook, the whispers of a shadowed watcher. They all pointed to secrets Lily had kept, secrets someone wanted buried. If answers lay anywhere, it was here, in the heart of Lily's world. She'd returned to the cottage after, her talks with Clara, Vincent and Sarah, each conversation adding weight to the puzzle. Clara's bitterness, Vincent's obsession, Sarah's regret. They were pieces, but not the whole picture. The notebook from her last visit had been a start, its cryptic entries hinting at a man in Lily's life. But it wasn't enough. Miss Jane needed more. Something raw, unfiltered, something Lily hadn't meant for anyone to find. She moved to the far wall, where a heavy wooden cabinet stood, its doors warped by time. The police had searched it 20 years ago, but Miss Jane knew how easily things were overlooked in the chaos of a murder investigation. She tugged at the doors, wincing as they groaned open. Inside were stacks of sketch pads, paint cans, and a few rolled-up canvases. Nothing unusual at first glance. Then her fingers brushed something hard behind a pile of rags. A small locked box, no bigger than a cigar case, its surface etched with a faint LH. Miss Marple's breath caught. She hadn't seen this in the original evidence logs. She pried it open with a letter opener from Lily's desk, the lock giving way with a soft snap. Inside was a slim diary, its pages yellowed but intact, bound in faded blue leather. The first page bore Lily's flowing script. For my thoughts, too wild for the world. Miss Jane settled onto a stool, ignoring the ache in her back, and began to read. The diary was a window into Lily's soul. Each entry a brushstroke of her life. She wrote of her art, her dreams, her loneliness in St. Mary Mead's adoring but suffocating embrace. But it was the entries from the spring of 2005, months before her death, that made Miss Marple's pulse quicken. April 3rd, 2005. He came to the studio again today, always polite, always watching. I told him to stop, but he just smiled. He thinks he knows me, but he doesn't. Nobody does. I should lock the door when I paint, but I hate feeling caged. April 15th, 2005. Vincent was here, drunk, begging me to love him. I can't. He's too much like a storm, all fury and no peace. But there's someone else, someone quieter. I see him in the trees sometimes, just standing there. It's not Vincent. It's not Henry. I don't know what he wants, and that scares me. May 20th, 2005. I told Sarah I feel watched, but she laughed it off. Maybe I'm paranoid. But last night I found a note slipped. I swear I didn't hear it, just felt it. Someone slid it under my door. Meet me at the Oak, midnight. I burned it. I'm not a fool. Miss Marple's hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages. A stalker, a note, a secret meeting. None of this had surfaced in the original investigation. The diary painted a picture of Lily as a woman caught in a web of admiration and danger, her charisma a magnet for both love and obsession. The mysterious he wasn't named, but the scratched-out face in the locket loomed in Miss Marple's mind. Was this the same man? She paused at an entry dated just 3 days before Lily's death, July 9th, 2005. I saw him again, closer this time. He spoke my name, soft, like a prayer. I should have run, but I didn't. There's something about him that pulls me in, even though I know it's wrong. God help me, I think I'm falling for him. Miss Marple's heart sank. Lily had been drawn to her own killer, or someone close to him. The diary ended abruptly, its final pages blank, as if Lily had run out of time to write, or to live. A noise outside snapped Miss Jane back to the present. A rustle, too deliberate to be the wind. She slipped the diary into her bag and crept to the window, peering through the grime-streaked glass. The garden was empty, but the gate swung slightly, as if just released. Her skin prickled. Someone was watching her, just as they'd watched Lily. She hurried downstairs, locking the cottage behind her, the diary a heavy weight in her bag. Back in her parlour, she spread the case files alongside the diary and notebook, cross-referencing names. Vincent, Henry, Clara, Sarah. None fit the diary's description of a quiet, shadowy figure. But there was another name, one Vincent had mentioned. Henry Carver, the landlord. The diary hadn't named him explicitly, but his polite visits to the studio matched Lily's words. And the note, "Meet me at the Oak," echoed the letter that had started this all, left at the same tree. Miss Jane picked up the locket, tracing the LH engraving. The scratched-out face inside was a taunt, a clue just out of reach. She needed to talk to Henry Carver, to see if the man who'd owned Lily's home had also claimed her heart, or her life. But first she needed to know who was following her. The rustle in the garden, the hooded figure Tom had seen. They were no coincidence. She glanced at the clock. Dusk was falling, and St. Mary Mead's streets would soon be empty. Miss Jane tightened her grip on her cane, her resolve hardening. Lily's diary had given her a voice, and Miss Jane would not let it be silenced again. Chapter 5. The Village's Dark Underbelly. The fog rolled into St. Mary Mead at dusk, cloaking the village in a ghostly haze that muffled sound and blurred edges. Miss Jane Marple walked the narrow lanes, her cane tapping a steady rhythm, the diary and locket tucked safely in her bag. Lily Hawthorne's words burned in her mind. He spoke my name, soft, like a prayer, and with them a growing certainty that the key to the murder lay not just in Lily's life, but in the village itself. St. Mary Mead was no idyllic haven, it was a nest of secrets, and Miss Jane was ready to rattle its foundations. Her first stop was the village hall, where old records and gossip lived side by side. She'd called ahead to arrange a meeting with Margaret Tate, the hall's archivist, and a woman who knew every scandal since the war. Margaret, a spry 75 with a penchant for floral scarves, greeted Miss Jane with a knowing smile. "Miss Jane Marple, stirring the pot again," Margaret said, leading her to a cluttered office. Lily Hawthorne, I presume. The whole village is buzzing about your little treasure hunt." "Let them buzz," Miss Jane replied, settling into a chair. "I need dirt, Margaret. Not the kind in the gossip mill, but the kind that stuck to Lily. Who envied her? Who wanted her gone?" Margaret's eyes gleamed. "You don't mince words, do you? Lily was a lightning rod. Beautiful, talented, and didn't care who she upset. You've got your suspects, Clara, Vincent, Henry, but it's the connections between them that matter." "Connections?" Miss Jane leaned forward, her pen poised over a notebook. Margaret pulled a ledger from a shelf, its pages filled with names and dates. "This is the village social calendar from 2005. Fairs, art shows, choir events. Lily was at the heart of them all. But look here." She tapped an entry for a spring art exhibition. "Lily's painting won first prize, beating Clara's solo performance and Vincent's submission. Clara was livid, called it favouritism. Vincent smashed a bottle outside the hall that night." Miss Jane nodded. She'd known about the rivalry, but not its intensity. "And Henry Carver? Where does he fit?" Margaret's smile faded. "Henry was complicated. Owned half the village, including Lily's cottage. He was charming, generous with his money, but possessive. Rumour was he fancied Lily, gave her that cottage at a steal. Some said it wasn't just kindness." "An affair?" Miss Jane asked, her voice low. "Not quite." Margaret flipped to another page. "A lease agreement. Lily signed this in 2004, but there's a note in Henry's handwriting. Special terms for LH. People whispered he wanted more than rent money, but Lily wasn't the type to play along. If she rejected him, well, Henry didn't take kindly. To know." Miss Marple's mind raced. The diary's polite visitor, the note under the door. Henry fit the profile. But rumours weren't proof. Anyone else? Someone outside the main circle? Margaret hesitated, then leaned closer. There was a man, not a villager. Showed up at events, always on the edges. Quiet, dark hair, kept to himself. Nobody knew his name, but he was at Lily's last art show, watching her like she was the only person in the room. After she died, he vanished. Miss Marple's grip tightened on her cane. The diary's shadowy figure, the scratched-out face in the locket. Why didn't this come up in the investigation? Margaret shrugged. Police didn't ask the right people, and St. Mary Mead protects its own, even when it shouldn't. Armed with Margaret's revelations, Miss Jane headed to Henry Carver's manor, a sprawling estate on the village's edge. Henry, now in his late 60s, was still a figure of influence, though his wealth had dwindled. The manor's grandeur was faded, its gardens overgrown, but Henry himself was impeccably dressed when he greeted her, his silver hair slicked back, his smile practised. "Miss Marple," he said, ushering her into a study lined with hunting trophies. "I'd heard you were revisiting old wounds. How can I help?" Miss Jane didn't sit. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Henry. You were Lily's landlord. You gave her a cottage for next to nothing. Why?" His smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "She was a talent. I supported the arts. Simple as that." "Simple?" Miss Marple's voice was sharp. "You visited her studio often. She wrote about it. Someone polite, always watching. Sound familiar?" Henry's fingers drummed on his desk. "I checked on my tenant, yes. Lily was captivating. I admired her work. If she felt watched, it wasn't me." "Then who?" Miss Jane pressed. "She wrote about a man, someone who slipped notes under her door. One said to meet at the old oak. Ring any bells?" For a moment Henry's composure slipped, his face paling. "Notes? I don't know anything about that. Lily was private. If she had a suitor, she didn't share it with me." Miss Jane studied him, noting the sweat beading on his brow. He was lying, or at least hiding something. "You wanted her, Henry." She said no. "A man like you doesn't take rejection lightly." He stood, his voice cold. "Careful, Miss Marple. Accusations like that need proof, and you have none. I was at a council meeting the night she died. Dozens saw me. Find someone else to hound." She left the manor, the fog thicker now, curling around her like a warning. Henry's alibi was solid, but his reaction to the note was telling. He knew more than he'd let on. Back in her parlour, Miss Jane spread out the diary, the locket, and her notes. The village's underbelly was coming into focus. Clara's envy, Vincent's obsession, Henry's possessiveness, and a mysterious outsider who'd vanished after the murder. But there was another thread. Sarah, Lily's friend, had mentioned Lily feeling watched, yet hadn't pushed for details. Was Sarah hiding something too? A soft thud outside her window made Miss Jane freeze. She peered through the curtains, seeing only fog and shadows. But as she turned away, a folded paper lay on her doormat, slipped under the door. Her heart pounded as she opened it, revealing a single typed line. "You're closer than you think. Look to the one who loved her most." Miss Marple's breath caught, the same spidery ink as the first letter. Someone was guiding her, or toying with her. She clutched the diary, its pages whispering Lily's fears. The village was closing in, and Miss Jane was running out of time to untangle its lies. Chapter 6. The Witness Who Lied. The morning air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Miss Jane Marple sat at her kitchen table. The latest mysterious note looked to the one who loved her most, staring up at her like a dare. Its typed words matched the first letter, the one that had sent her to the oak. Someone was orchestrating this, feeding her just enough to keep her chasing Lily Hawthorne's killer. But the note's vagueness gnawed at her. Who loved Lily most? Vincent with his obsessive paintings? Sarah, her heartbroken friend? Or someone yet to emerge from the shadows? Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the original investigation, to a witness whose story had always felt off. Beatrice Lang, a baker's widow who'd lived across from Lily's cottage. Beatrice, then in her 50s, had sworn she saw nothing. The night of the murder, claiming she'd been asleep by 9. But her statement was too neat, too rehearsed, and Miss Marple's instincts had prickled even then. Now, with the diary's hints of a stalker and the village's tangled motives, Beatrice's silence seemed less like ignorance and more like a shield. She found Beatrice at the village bakery, now run by her son. The old woman, frail but sharp-eyed, at 75, was kneading dough in the back, her hands dusted with flour. She looked up as Miss Jane entered, her face tightening. "Miss Marple," Beatrice said, wiping her hands on an apron. "I knew you'd come sniffing around eventually. What's it this time?" Miss Jane didn't smile. Lily Hawthorne. You lied to me 20 years ago, Beatrice. I want the truth." Beatrice's hands stilled, and for a moment the only sound was the hum of an oven. "That's a bold claim," she said, her voice low. "I told the police what I knew. I was asleep when Lily was killed. Were you?" Miss Jane stepped closer, her cane tapping the floor. "You lived 50 feet from her cottage. You were nosy even then. Don't deny it. You saw something or someone, and you kept it to yourself. Why?" Beatrice's eyes darted to the door, then back to Miss Marple. She sighed, her shoulders sagging. "All right, you're right. I wasn't asleep, but you don't understand what it was like back then. The village was in chaos, everyone pointing fingers. I didn't want trouble." "Trouble?" Miss Marple's voice was steel. "A woman was murdered, Beatrice. Trouble was already here. What did you see?" Beatrice sank onto a stool, her hands twisting in her apron. "It was late, maybe 11. I was at my window. Couldn't sleep. I saw someone outside. Lily's cottage near the garden gate. Not close enough to see their face, but they were careful, like they didn't want to be noticed. They stood there a long time, just watching her windows." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Man or woman? Tall, short? Give me something." "A man, I think. Average height, dark clothes. He had a hood or a hat, couldn't tell. But he wasn't Vincent, too slight for that. And not Henry Carver either. He's broader, always was." Beatrice's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't tell the police because I was scared. Whoever it was, they looked up at my window, like they knew I was there. I closed the curtains and hid." Miss Jane leaned forward, her eyes boring into Beatrice's. "Why lie? You could have helped catch a killer." Beatrice's lip trembled, "Because the next day I found a note on my doorstep. Just a scrap of paper, no signature. It said, 'Keep quiet or you're next.' I burned it. I had a son to protect, Miss Marple. I couldn't risk it." A chill ran through Miss Marple. Another note, 20 years ago, silencing a witness. It mirrored the ones she'd received, typed and cryptic. The same hand, or a copycat playing a long game. "Did you ever see that man again?" she asked. Beatrice shook her head. "Not after Lily died. But there's something else. A week before the murder, I saw Lily arguing with someone in her garden. Not Vincent or Henry. A stranger, dark-haired, quiet. She was upset, waving her hands, but he just stood there, calm as stone. I couldn't hear what they said." Miss Marple's mind flashed to the diary. He spoke my name, soft, like a prayer. And Margaret's mention of a mysterious outsider at Lily's art show. "Why didn't you tell me this yesterday, when I was digging into the village records?" "I wasn't sure it mattered," Beatrice said, her voice small. "And I'm still scared, Miss Marple. Whoever's sending you those notes, they're watching. They know you're close." Miss Marple's grip on her cane tightened. Beatrice's fear was real, and it pointed to a killer who'd controlled St. Mary Mead through silence and threats. "If you remember anything else, you come to me," she said. "No more hiding." Beatrice nodded, but her eyes were haunted. "Be careful, Miss Marple. Lily didn't see it coming. You might not, either. Outside, the village felt different, its quaint cottages hiding eyes in every window." Miss Jane walked to the churchyard, needing a quiet place to think. She sat on a bench near Lily's grave, a simple stone engraved with Lily Hawthorne, 1977-2005. Beloved artist. The diary's words and Beatrice's confession swirled in her mind. A hooded man watching Lily's cottage, a threatening note, a stranger arguing with her days before her death. The pieces were forming a pattern, but the centre, the killer's face, remained blank. She pulled the locket from her pocket, opening it to the scratched-out photo. The man's jawline, barely visible, was all she had. Was he the stranger Beatrice saw? The one who'd loved Lily most, as the note claimed? Vincent's obsession was loud, Henry's desire possessive, but this figure was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of the investigation. A twig snapped behind her. Miss Jane turned, her heart leaping, but saw only a squirrel darting across the grass. Still, the air felt charged, as if the village itself was holding its breath. She tucked the locket away and stood, her resolve hardening. Beatrice's lie had cracked open the case, pointing to a new suspect, an outsider who'd vanished after the murder. But finding him meant confronting the one man who'd always been at the edges of the case, Henry Carver, whose reaction to the oak note had betrayed his fear. As she headed toward Henry's manor, the latest note's words echoed, "You're closer than you think." Miss Jane wasn't just close. She was on the killer's trail, and they knew it. Chapter 7. The Night of the Murder. The evening sky over St. Mary Mead was bruised with clouds, casting a restless gloom over the village. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, the case files spread across her table like a map of a battlefield. The locket, diary, and Beatrice's confession had shifted the ground beneath her, and now she needed to rebuild the night Lily Hawthorne died, July 12th, 2005. The original investigation had pinned the murder between 10 p.m. and midnight, but the timeline was riddled with holes, and Miss Jane was determined to plug them. She started with the diary's final entries. Lily's words, a haunting guide. The last one, dated July 9th, spoke of a man she was drawn to, despite her fear. No entry existed for the day of the murder, but earlier notes mentioned a note slipped under her door. "Meet me at the Oak, midnight," and Beatrice's sighting of a hooded man watching Lily's cottage around 11 p.m. These were anchors, but the rest was fog. Miss Marple's first move was to revisit Sarah Finch, Lily's closest friend, who'd been out of town the night of the murder, but might recall Lily's state of mind. She found Sarah at the pub, polishing glasses behind the bar, her face pale under the dim lights. "Miss Marple," Sarah said, setting down a glass, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Lily's ghost, maybe," Miss Jane replied, sliding onto a stool. "I need to know about the days before she died. What was she like? Scared? Distracted?" Sarah's hands trembled slightly. She was off, quiet, which wasn't like her. The day before, she came here for lunch, said she needed to sort something out. I asked what, but she just smiled and said, "You'll laugh when I tell you." I never got the chance to hear it. Miss Jane leaned closer. Did she mention a meeting? Something planned for that night? Sarah frowned, thinking, not exactly. But she checked her watch a lot, like she was waiting for something. And she kept looking at the door, like she expected someone to walk in. I thought it was Vincent pestering her again. Miss Jane noted that. Lily, anticipating something or someone. Did she ever talk about a note or meeting at the old oak? Sarah shook her head. No, but... Wait, that day she had a scrap of paper in her hand, folded tight. I teased her about love letters, and she laughed, but it was forced. I didn't push. Miss Marple's mind raced. The oak note, clutched like a secret. One more thing, Sarah. You said she felt watched. Did she ever point out someone specific at the pub? Maybe a stranger? Sarah's eyes widened. Once, a couple of weeks before, a man was sitting in the corner, dark hair, quiet. She nodded toward him and said, "He's always there." I didn't think much of it. He was gone the next day, the mysterious outsider again. Miss Jane thanked Sarah and left, the timeline taking shape. Lily, nervous, holding a note, expecting someone the day before her death. Next, Miss Jane tracked down Vincent Reed at his barn studio, where he was, scrubbing paint off his hands, his eyes bloodshot. The air smelled of turpentine and frustration. Back again, Vincent growled. What now, Marple? The night Lily died, Miss Jane said, her voice calm but firm. You said you were painting alone, but someone saw you near the pub around 10 p.m. Care to explain? Vincent froze, then laughed, harsh and hollow. Someone's lying. I was in my old flat working. You saw my sketches, dated, detailed. I didn't leave until morning. Sketches can be faked, Miss Jane said, echoing her earlier challenge. And you were obsessed with her. If she was meeting someone at midnight, you'd have wanted to know. His face darkened. I loved her, yeah, but I wasn't stalking her. If I was near the pub, I'd have been drunk, not spying. Check with the old barman, George. He's still alive. He'd remember if I was there. Miss Jane made a mental note to find George. Vincent's alibi was shaky, but his denial felt genuine or well-rehearsed. Did Lily ever mention a meeting at the Oak, or a man she was drawn to? Vincent's jaw clenched. She didn't tell me her secrets, but yeah, she was different. That last week, distant. I thought she was done with me for good. His voice cracked. Maybe she was. Miss Marple's final stop was Henry Carver's manor, where the fog from the previous night lingered like a bad memory. Henry answered the door, his charm replaced by irritation. "This is getting old, Miss Marple," he said, blocking the doorway. "I've told you everything." "Not quite," she said, stepping past him. "The night Lily died, you were at a council meeting until 10:30, yes? But Lily's cottage is a 5-minute walk. Plenty of time to slip over before midnight. Henry's eyes narrowed. You're grasping. I went home after the meeting. My housekeeper can confirm it. Can she?" Miss Marple's tone was icy. "Lily had a note, Henry. Meet me at the Oak, midnight. You knew about it, didn't you? You were possessive, and she was slipping away." He paled, his hands fidgeting. "I told you I didn't know about any note. If she was meeting someone, it wasn't me. Maybe it was that painter fool, Vincent." Miss Jane watched him closely. His fear was real, but was it guilt or something else? "If I find out you lied, Henry, no council alibi will save you." She left, the timeline clearer but still fractured. Lily had been nervous, clutching a note, expecting someone. Beatrice saw a hooded man at 11 p.m. Vincent might have been near the pub at 10. Henry was free after 10:30. And the stranger, dark-haired, quiet, hovered like a phantom. Back in her parlour, Miss Jane sketched a timeline on a sheet of paper. PM. Lily likely at home, possibly alone. Gigs PM. Vincent possibly near pub, unconfirmed. 10:30 PM. Henry leaves council meeting. PM. Hooded man seen by Beatrice watching Lily's cottage. Midnight. Note suggests a meeting at the Oak, but no evidence Lily went. 2 PM. 12 AM. Lily stabbed in her studio. The gap was maddening. Why was Lily in her studio, not at the Oak? Did the killer lure her back, or never intend for her to leave? The diary's final entry, Lily drawn to a dangerous man, suggested she might have let him in, trusted him. But who? A soft creak came from her porch. Miss Marple's hand went to her cane, her heart steady despite the hour. She opened the door, finding nothing but a single white flower on her step. A lily, its petals stark against the dark. No note this time, just a message in the bloom itself. The killer was close, and they were watching. Miss Jane picked up the flower, her resolve hardening. The night of the murder was no longer a blur. It was a puzzle, and she was missing just one piece. Chapter 8. The Forgotten Alibi. The morning light in St. Mary Mead was thin, filtered through a veil of mist that clung to the village like a secret. Miss Jane Marple sat at her dining table, the white lily from her porch now resting in a glass of water, its petals a stark reminder of the killer's taunting presence. Her timeline of Lily Hawthorne's murder night was pinned to the wall, a web of times, names, and question marks. But something was missing, a detail buried in the chaos of the original investigation, something she'd overlooked 20 years ago. She turned to the case files, their pages worn from her relentless scrutiny. The witness statements, forensic reports, and suspect alibis were familiar. But Miss Marple's instincts told her to dig deeper into the margins. The notes scribbled by junior officers who'd been too green to know what mattered. One file, a miscellaneous log of interview, caught her eye. It was a collection of minor testimonies, dismissed as irrelevant at the time. She flipped through it, her finger pausing on a single entry dated July 13th, 2005, the day after the murder. Interview with George Hartley, pub barman, 10:30 a.m. States he saw Thomas Grayson, postman, at the pub on July 12th approx. 10:45 p.m., drinking alone. Grayson claimed he was just passing through after a late delivery. No further details. Not pursued. Miss Marple's breath caught. Thomas Grayson. Tom, the village postman who'd warned her about a hooded figure by the Oak just days ago. He'd been a peripheral figure in 2005, a young man in his 20s, never a suspect. His name appeared nowhere else in the files. His presence at the pub brushed off as routine, but the timeline nagged at her. Tom, at the pub at 10:45 p.m., close to Lily's cottage, just before Beatrice saw the hooded man at 11. So, and now, 20 years later, he was the first to mention the Oak, as if steering her toward the Locket. She leaned back, her mind racing. Tom had always been part of St. Mary Mead's fabric, reliable, unassuming, the man who knew everyone's business but kept his own quiet. Could he have been the stranger in Lily's diary, the one who spoke her name like a prayer? Or was he the hooded figure watching from the shadows? Miss Jane grabbed her coat and headed for the post office, where Tom was sorting letters behind the counter. His cap was tilted, his face friendly, but guarded as she approached. "Miss Marple," he said, setting down a stack of envelopes. "More questions about Lily, I reckon?" "Always," Miss Jane said, her tone light but her eyes piercing. "Let's talk about the night she died. You were at the pub, 10:45 p.m. Care to tell me why?" Tom's smile faltered, his hands pausing. "The pub? That was ages ago. I don't remember every pint I had 20 years back." "Don't play coy, Tom," Miss Jane said, stepping closer. "You told the police you were just passing, through after a late delivery. But the post office closes at 6. What delivery kept you out till nearly 11? He shifted, glancing at the door as if hoping for a customer to interrupt. "All right, fine. I was delivering a package. Off. The books. Some folks paid extra for late drops. Nothing shady, just discreet." "Discreet," Miss Jane repeated, her voice sharp. "To whom? And don't lie, Tom. I'm not as patient as I was 20 years ago." Tom sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It was for Lily. A small parcel, no return address. I slipped it through her letterbox around 10:30, then went to the pub to unwind. That's it." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. A parcel, unlogged, delivered hours before Lily's death. What was in it? "I didn't open it," Tom said, defensive. "It was light, maybe papers or a book. I didn't think twice. Lily got odd packages sometimes, art supplies, fan letters. She was that sort." "Did you see her when you dropped it off?" Miss Jane asked. "Or anyone else near her cottage?" Tom hesitated, his eyes flickering. "Her lights were on, but I didn't see her. Nobody else either, I swear." Miss Jane studied him. His story was plausible, but his unease betrayed more. "You saw someone, Tom. That's why you mentioned the hooded figure by the oak. You're not just a bystander. You're in this." His face paled. "I'm not your killer, Miss Marple. I liked Lily. Everyone did. But yeah, I saw someone that night after I left her place. A man, near the lane, by her cottage, hooded, moving fast. I didn't get a good look, and I didn't want trouble, so I kept walking." "Why didn't you tell the police?" Miss Jane pressed. "Because I was scared," Tom snapped, his voice cracking. "Whoever it was, they saw me too. The next day, I got a note, 'Stay quiet.' I burned it, like Beatrice did. I had a family, a job. I couldn't risk it." Another note, another silenced witness. Miss Marple's mind spun. Tom's alibi placed him near the crime scene, but his fear mirrored Beatrice's, suggesting he wasn't the killer, just another pawn in their game. But the parcel intrigued her. It wasn't in the evidence log, meaning it was either taken by the killer or overlooked by the police. She left the post office, the mist thicker now, curling around her like a warning. Back in her parlour, she added Tom's testimony to her timeline. 10:30 p.m. Tom delivers a parcel to Lily's cottage, sees her lights on. 10:45 p.m. Tom at the pub, possibly sees a hooded man near Lily's lane. 13 p.m. Beatrice sees a hooded man watching Lily's cottage. Midnight. Note suggests a meeting at the Oak, but Lily is killed in her studio. The parcel was a new thread. Was it the note Lily clutched, as Sarah described, Or something else. Art, a letter, a lure. Tom's forgotten alibi had cracked the timeline open, pointing to a man who'd moved through St. Mary Mead unseen, silencing witnesses with threats. But it also raised a question. Why had Tom come forward now, after 20 years of silence? As she pinned the updated timeline to the wall, a chill ran through her. The lily on her table seemed to watch her, its scent cloying. She checked her door, finding it locked, but the sense of being watched lingered. The killer was circling, and Tom's confession had just made the circle smaller. Chapter 9. Confronting the Past. The village hall in St. Mary Mead was a cavern of echoes, its wooden beams and high ceiling amplifying every creak and whisper. Miss Jane Marple stood at the front, her cane planted firmly, her silver hair catching the dim light of the chandelier. She'd called the meeting under the guise of a community update on Lily Hawthorne's case, but her true purpose was sharper, to bring the suspects together face to face and shake loose the truth. The diary, the locket, Tom's parcel, the notes, they were her weapons, and she wielded them with precision. The room filled slowly. Clara Weston sat in the front row, her arms crossed, her lips a tight line. Vincent Reed slouched near the back, his paint-stained hands fidgeting. Henry Carver stood by a window, his polished demeanour fraying at the edges. Sarah Finch hovered near the door, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. Tom Grayson lingered at the side, his postman's cap clutched like a shield. Beatrice Lang was absent, claiming illness, but Miss Jane had her testimony locked in her mind. Miss Jane cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the murmurs. 20 years ago, Lily Hawthorne was murdered in her studio. We failed her then. I won't fail her now. New evidence has come to light, and I'm here to ask questions, hard ones. If you're innocent, you've nothing to fear. If you're not, you'd better start talking. Clara snorted. This is a circus, Miss Marple. You've got nothing but old grudges and ghost stories. Have I? Miss Jane pulled the locket from her pocket, holding it up. Its silver glinted, drawing gasps. This was Lily's, found buried by the old oak. Inside is a photo of her with a man, his face scratched out. Anyone care to guess who? Vincent's head snapped up, his eyes wide. That's not mine. I never gave her a locket. Didn't say you did, Miss Jane replied, her gaze sweeping the room. But someone did. Someone she was close to. Someone she wrote about. She produced the diary, its blue leather worn but unmistakable. Lily kept a diary. She mentioned a man, quiet, watchful, someone she was drawn to, even though she feared him. Sound familiar, Henry? Henry's face flushed. I told you, I was her landlord, nothing more. I was at a council meeting that night. Check the records. Oh, I have, Miss Jane said. You left at 10:30. Plenty of time to reach Lily's cottage before midnight. And you knew about a note. Meet me at the oak midnight. You flinched when I mentioned it. Henry's hands clenched. I didn't send her any damn note. You're fishing, Miss Marple. Am I? She turned to Tom, who shrank under her gaze. Tom, tell them about the parcel you delivered to Lily at 10:30 that night. Tom's voice was barely audible. It was just a package. Light, maybe papers. I slipped it through her letterbox. Didn't see her. "But you saw someone," Miss Jane pressed. "A hooded man near her lane, right after. And the next day you got a note telling you to stay quiet, just like Beatrice, who saw the same man watching Lily's cottage at 11. The room tensed, eyes darting between faces. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you say anything, Tom? You knew Lily. You could have helped her." "I was scared," Tom snapped, his cap crumpling in his hands. "Whoever it was, they meant business. I had a kid to think of." Clara stood, her voice sharp. "This is nonsense. You're dragging us through the mud for nothing. Lily was reckless. Lovers, enemies. Who knows what she got mixed up in? Maybe she brought it on herself." Sarah whirled on her. "Don't you dare. Lily was kind, brilliant. She didn't deserve this." "Enough," Miss Marple's voice cracked like a whip. "Lily was murdered, and one of you knows more than you're saying. Vincent, you were seen near the pub at 10:45, not painting in your flat. Sarah, Lily was holding a note that day. Nervous, expecting someone. And Henry, your admiration for Lily looks a lot like obsession." Vincent surged to his feet. "I loved her all right, but I didn't kill her. I was drunk, wandering, not near her cottage." "Prove it," Miss Jane said coldly. "Because someone slipped a note under my door last night, typed, just like the one that started this. Look to the one who loved her most." "Who was that, Vincent? You? Henry? Or someone else, someone who's been watching alls?" The room fell silent, all eyes on Miss Marple. Then, from the back, a voice, low, hesitant. It was Tom. "Miss Marple, there's something else. The man in the locket. I think I know him." Miss Marple's heart stopped. "Who?" Tom swallowed hard. "His name's Daniel Shaw. He wasn't from St. Mary Mead. Quiet, dark hair. He came to Lily's art shows, always staring at her. After she died, he left. Nobody saw him again. The name hit like a thunderbolt. Daniel Shaw. Not Vincent, not Henry, not Tom. A ghost from the past, the stranger Beatrice and Sarah had described." The room erupted in murmurs, but Miss Marple's mind was already racing. Daniel Shaw, the man who loved Lily most, whose face was scratched out in her locket. The killer, or the key to finding them. She fixed Tom with a steely gaze. "Why tell me now?" Tom's voice broke. "Because I saw him again. Last week by the oak. He's back." The air in the hall seemed to vanish. Miss Marple's grip on her cane tightened. The killer was no longer a shadow. They had a name, and they were close. The confrontation had cracked the case wide open, and the truth was within reach. Chapter 10. The Final Clue. The morning after the village hall confrontation, St. Mary Mead was quiet, as if holding its breath. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlour, the locket, diary, and notes spread before her like pieces of a shattered mirror. Tom's revelation, Daniel Shaw, the mysterious outsider seen again by the oak, had electrified the case. But a name wasn't enough. Miss Jane needed proof, a thread to tie Shaw to Lily's murder. The killer was close, their taunts bolder. The lily on her porch, the typed notes. And she sensed the truth was hidden in something small, something overlooked. She returned to Lily's cottage, the studio, a familiar haunt now, its air heavy with dust and secrets. The police had combed it 20 years ago, and she'd searched it twice. But the diary's discovery had taught her to look where others hadn't. Daniel Shaw, the man who loved Lily most, had left a trace. She just had to find it. Miss Jane moved to the desk, its drawers long emptied, and ran her fingers along its underside. Nothing. She checked the floorboards, tapping for hollow spots, but they were solid. Frustration gnawed at her until her eyes fell on a small, battered tin on a shelf. A paint can, unremarkable, its lid rusted shut. It hadn't been logged in the evidence list. The police had assumed it was just art supplies. But something about it felt wrong, like a note played out of tune. She pried it open with a screwdriver, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Inside, nestled among dried paint flakes, was a single object. A brass key, small and ornate, its bow shaped like a heart. Miss Marple's breath caught. It wasn't a house key, too delicate. A Locket key, perhaps, or something else entirely. She examined it closely, noting a tiny engraving, D.S. Daniel Shaw. The initials were a jolt, a direct link to the man Tom had named. But what did it unlock? She checked the locket, but it had no keyhole, its clasp simple. The diary offered no clues. Lily never mentioned a key. Yet the Khan's placement, hidden in plain sight, suggested intent. Someone, Shaw or the killer, had wanted it to stay hidden. Miss Jane slipped the key into her pocket and headed to the village archives, where Margaret Tate was sorting records. The archivist's eyes lit up at the sight of her. "Miss Marple, you're a bloodhound," Margaret said, pushing aside a ledger. "What's the latest?" Miss Jane held up the key, its brass catching the light. "I've found this in Lily's studio. Engraved with D.S. Daniel Shaw, I'm betting. Ever hear of him having a connection to Lily beyond staring at her art shows?" Margaret frowned, tapping her chin. "Shaw? Yes, I remember him. Quiet, always, at the edges of things. He rented a room at the inn for a few months in '05. Paid cash, kept to himself. But a key? That's new. Could be for a lockbox, maybe, or something personal." "A lockbox," Miss Jane mused. "Any record of Shaw owning property here, or Lily storing something?" Margaret shook her head. "Not in the archives, but the inn might know more. Old Mrs. Harrow, the innkeeper then, is still alive. Lives out by the mill now. She's got a memory like a steel trap." Miss Jane found Mrs. Harrow in a cottage near the mill, a spry 80-year-old tending roses. The woman's eyes narrowed. At the key, recognition flickering. "That's no ordinary key," Mrs. Harrow said, setting down her shears. "Daniel Shaw had one like it. He kept a small chest in his room at the inn, locked, never let the maids near it. Said it was for personal effects. Left it behind when he vanished after Lily's death." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Where's the chest now?" Mrs. Harrow shrugged. "Stored in the inn's attic, I suppose. Nobody claimed it, and I wasn't about to pry. But if it's Shaw's, it might tell you what he was to Lily." Miss Jane drove to the inn, her mind buzzing. The current manager, a bored young man, led her to the attic, a maze of cobwebs and forgotten luggage. After an hour of searching, she found it. A small wooden chest, its lock matching the key's heart-shaped bow. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, and a single photograph. Lily, laughing, her arm around Daniel Shaw. His face was clear this time. Dark hair, quiet eyes, a half-smile that held both love and sorrow. The letters were, from Lily to Shaw, never sent, each one a confession of her feelings. Daniel, you see me like no one else does, but I'm scared. Of you, of us. You're too good, too real. I don't know if I can let you in. I saw you by the oak again. Why do you watch me? I want to trust you, but something's holding me back. The final letter, dated July 11th, 2005, was unfinished, Daniel. I'll meet you tomorrow, midnight, at the oak. I need to know if this is real. If you're... It stopped abruptly, as if Lily had been interrupted. Miss Marple's heart sank. Lily had planned to meet Shaw, but she died in her studio instead. Had Shaw lured her back? Or had someone else intercepted her? She tucked the letters into her bag, the photograph burning in her mind. Shaw wasn't just an admirer. He was Lily's secret, the man she'd loved and feared. The key had unlocked the truth of their relationship, but it also raised a question. If Shaw loved her, why scratch his face from the locket? And why was he back now, after 20 years? As she left the inn, the sky darkened, a storm brewing. A shadow moved across the street, a figure, hooded, gone in a blink. Miss Marple's grip on her cane tightened. The key had brought her closer to the killer, but it had also made her a target. Chapter 11. The Twist of Fate. The storm broke over St. Mary Mead at dusk, rain lashing the village in relentless sheets. Miss Jane Marple stood in her parlour, and the letters from Lily to Daniel Shaw spread across her table. Their words a haunting echo of a love cut short. The brass key, the locket, the diary, all pointed to Shaw as the man Lily had loved, the one she'd planned to meet at the oak the night she died. But Lily had been killed in her studio, not at the oak, and Shaw's return after 20 years suggested a truth Miss Jane had yet to grasp. The killer was close, their taunts, the Lily, the notes escalating. Tonight she would end it. Miss Jane had arranged a final confrontation, not in the village hall, but at Lily's cottage, the heart of the mystery. She'd sent word to the suspects, Clara, Vincent, Henry, Sarah, and Tom, claiming she'd found the killer and needed their presence to close the case. But she'd also left a message for Daniel Shaw, slipped under the inn's door. I know who you are. Meet me at Lily's cottage, 8 p.m. If Shaw was the killer, he'd come. If he wasn't, he'd still have answers. The cottage was dark when Miss Jane arrived, its windows like empty eyes. She unlocked the door, her cane steady despite the storm's roar, and lit a single lamp in the studio. The chalk outline of Lily's body glowed faintly on the floor, a silent witness. Miss Jane arranged the evidence on the desk. The locket, the diary, the letters, the key, and waited. They arrived one by one, their faces taut with suspicion. Clara, her arms crossed, muttered about the rain. Vincent, paint still on his hands, glared at the others. Henry stood stiffly, his eyes darting to the locket. Sarah clutched a scarf, her gaze fixed on the chalk outline. Tom lingered by the door, his cap crumpled in his fists. Daniel Shaw hadn't appeared, but Miss Jane felt his presence like a shadow just out of sight. "Thank you for coming," Miss Jane began, her voice cutting through the tension. Tonight, we end Lily Hawthorne's murder. The killer is among us, or close by, and I know who it is." Clara scoffed. "More theatrics, Miss Marple. You've dragged us here for nothing." "Have I?" Miss Jane held up the locket. This was buried by the oak, with a photo of Lily and Daniel Shaw, his face scratched out. Lily loved him, but someone wanted him erased. Why? Vincent's jaw tightened. "I told you, it wasn't me. I didn't know about Shaw." "But you did," Miss Jane said, turning to Sarah. "You saw him at the pub, watching Lily. You called him always there. Yet you never mentioned him to the police." Sarah's eyes widened. "I didn't think he mattered. He was just a face. Lily never said his name." Miss Jane nodded, then held up the diary. Lily wrote about a man she feared but loved, Daniel Shaw. She planned to meet him at the oak at midnight, but she died here instead. Someone stopped her. She turned to Henry. "You, Henry. You wanted Lily, and she rejected you. You knew about the oak note. You flinched when I mentioned it." Henry's face reddened. "I've said it 100 times. I was at a council meeting. I didn't send her any note." "Then who did?" Miss Marple's gaze swept the room, landing on Tom. "Tom, you delivered a parcel to Lily that night, 10:30. You saw a hooded man, but you also saw Shaw recently, by the oak. Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Tom's voice cracked. "I told you. I was scared. Shaw's back, and I didn't want to be next." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Scared or guilty? You've been too close to this, Tom. The notes, the Lily. You knew where to point me." The room froze. Then a soft creak came from the stairs. All heads turned as a man stepped into the light. Daniel Shaw, older now, his dark hair streaked with grey, his eyes hollow but intense. He held a typed note, identical to Miss Marple's. "You called me Miss Marple," Shaw said, his voice low. "I'm here, but I didn't kill Lily." Miss Marple's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. "Then tell me who did. You loved her. She was going to meet you. What happened?" Shaw's gaze fell to the chalk outline, pain etching his face. "I waited at the oak, midnight, like her letter said. She never came. I thought she'd changed her mind. The next morning I heard she was dead. I left. Couldn't bear it. But I didn't scratch my face from that locket, and I didn't send those notes." "Then who did?" Miss Jane pressed, her voice rising. "Someone knew about your meeting. Someone lured her back here, stabbed her, and silenced the village with threats." A sob broke the silence. Sarah, trembling, sank to her knees. "It was me," she whispered. "I killed her." The room gasped. Miss Marple's mind reeled, but she held steady, her eyes locked on Sarah. "Explain." Sarah's voice was barely audible, choked with tears. "I loved Lily, not like a friend, like everything. She was my world, but she didn't see me that way. She was falling for him." She pointed at Shaw. "I found her letter to him about the oak. I was jealous, furious. I went to her studio that night, begged her to choose me. She was kind, but she said no. I lost it. I grabbed her palette knife, and before I knew it, she was on the floor." Miss Marple's chest tightened. Sarah, the grieving friend, had been the killer all along. "The note about the oak," she said. "You sent it?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming. I copied her handwriting, sent it to Shaw to get him out of the way. I didn't plan to kill her. It just happened. After, I scratched his face from the locket, buried it. I sent the notes to Beatrice, to Tom, to keep them quiet. And the notes to me? Miss Jane asked, her voice cold. The lily? Sarah shook her head. That wasn't me, I swear. Miss Jane turned to Shaw, who looked as stunned as the others. You've been back, Daniel. Why? Shaw's voice was hoarse. I got a note, typed like yours. Said the all truth about Lily was coming out. I came to clear my name. I've been watching, trying to understand. Miss Marple's mind raced. Sarah's confession fit the murder, the locket, the silenced witnesses. But the recent notes, the lily, they pointed to someone else, someone who'd known Sarah's secret and used it to pull Miss Jane into the game. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Tom, whose face was pale, his hands shaking. Tom, she said sharply, you saw Shaw by the oak. You sent the notes, didn't you? You knew Sarah's guilt. Maybe you saw her that night, running from the cottage. You've been guiding me, not to help Lily, but to expose Sarah without getting blood on your hands. Tom bolted for the door, but Vincent grabbed him, pinning him against the wall. You bastard, Vincent growled. You let us all suffer. Tom's voice was a whimper. I saw her leave the cottage, covered in blood. I couldn't tell. My family, my life. I sent the notes to make it right, to make Sarah pay. Miss Marple's cane tapped the floor. A final note in the storm. Sarah's jealousy had killed Lily, but Tom's cowardice had kept the truth buried for 20 years. The twist was complete. Not a shadowy outsider, but a friend's betrayal, and a postman's guilt had unravelled St. Mary Mead's darkest secret. Chapter 12. Justice and Closure. The rain had stopped, leaving St. Mary Mead bathed in a fragile dawn. Miss Jane Marple stood outside Lily Hawthorne's cottage, the morning mist curling around her like a sigh. The events of the previous night, Sarah's confession, Tom's betrayal, had left the village raw, its secrets laid bare. The case was solved, but Miss Marple's work wasn't done. Lily deserved justice, and St. Mary Mead needed to heal. In the cottage's studio, now a crime scene once more, the police had taken Sarah into custody. Her tear-streaked face, as she was led away, haunted Miss Marple, not with pity, but with the weight of a friendship turned fatal. Sarah's jealousy had driven her to stab Lily, her love twisted into a moment of rage. The palette knife, a tool of creation, had become a weapon, and Sarah had spent 20 years hiding behind her grief, silencing witnesses with threats. Tom, the postman, faced charges for obstruction. His typed notes and the lily on Miss Marple's porch, his attempt to expose Sarah without facing his own cowardice. Miss Jane walked to the village green, where Lily's faded mural still clung to the library wall. She'd called a gathering, not for confrontation this time, but for closure. The suspects, Clara, Vincent, Henry, and others, like Beatrice and Margaret, stood in a loose circle, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow. Daniel Shaw was there too, his eyes fixed on the mural, as if seeing Lily in every brush stroke. "Thank you for coming," Miss Jane said, her voice steady despite the ache in her bones. "Lily Hawthorne's murder is solved. Sarah Finch killed. Her, driven by a love she couldn't bear to lose. Tom Grayson knew and stayed silent, manipulating us with notes to ease his guilt. They'll face justice, but that's not enough. Lily was more than a victim. She was your friend, your rival, your muse. We owe her truth. Clara, her arms no longer crossed, spoke softly. I envied her. I never said it, but I did. She was brighter than me. I'm sorry I let that cloud how I saw her. Vincent's voice was rough. I painted her for years, thinking it kept her alive, but I was just holding on to my own pain. I should have let her rest. Henry, his polish gone, looked older, smaller. I wanted her, yes, but I didn't know her, not really. I wish I'd just been her landlord, nothing more. Daniel Shaw stepped forward, his voice low but clear. Lily was my heart. I left because I couldn't face a world without her. I didn't know about Sarah, or I'd have come back sooner. Thank you, Miss Marple, for giving her justice. Miss Jane nodded, her throat tight. Lily's gone, but she's not forgotten. Her art, her spirit, it's in this village, in you. Let her rest now, and let yourselves heal. The crowd dispersed, some lingering to touch the mural, others walking away in silence. Miss Jane stayed, her cane sinking into the damp grass. She thought of the locket, now in evidence, its scratched-out photo a symbol of Sarah's desperation. The diary, the key, the letters, they'd led her to the truth. But it was Lily's voice, through her words and art, that had guided her most. Later, at the churchyard, Miss Jane visited Lily's grave. The stone was simple, but someone had left fresh lilies, their scent soft in the air. She knelt, ignoring the protest of her knees, and spoke quietly. You're free now, Lily. I'm sorry it took so long. As she stood, a figure approached, Margaret Tate holding a small canvas. Found this in the archives, Margaret said. One of Lily's sketches. Thought you should have it. Miss Jane took it, her breath catching. It was a drawing of St. Mary Mead's hills, vibrant and alive, with a tiny figure in the corner. A woman with silver hair and a cane, smiling. Lily had never met Miss Jane as she was now, but the sketch felt like a gift, a thank you across time. Back in her parlour, Miss Jane hung the sketch above her fireplace, its colours warming the room. The case files were packed away, the locket and diary with the police. St. Mary Mead would never be the same, but it was lighter now, its shadows lifted. Miss Jane poured a cup of chamomile tea, her hands steady, and sat by the window. Village stretched before her, quiet but alive, and for the first time in 20 years, she felt at peace. Lily Hawthorne's murder was solved, her killer named, her memory honoured, and Miss Jane Marple, the detective who'd never given up, could finally rest.